Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm George Spence, and I'm here with my co-host, Elliot Margolis. And our guest this evening from a return engagement, Stacy Ames, because she did so well in the primary. So you're still running.
That I am.
What are you learning different now?
Well, I've learned so much about this ward, and I'm just grateful to all the people who have met me at their door, invited me into their homes, have stopped me on the street to get to know them. And what it just has reinforced for me that what's important for Beverly is what's important for Ward 3 is important for Beverly. I still believe that Beverly is that Ward 3 is the most important ward in the city. It's central to the city. It's the business, the education center. And there are a number of neighborhoods that dot throughout the ward. Mm-hmm. And they each have their individual challenges and their individual exceptional qualities to them. So it's been a joy to get to know them, but I really believe more than ever that the people who live in Ward 3, the heart of this city, deserve a city councilor who will represent them with a strong voice at City Hall.
Well, when you get elected city councilor, what issues do you want to get the city to focus on for your ward?
I believe that the issues that are important to the people who live here and the businesses who are here are the issues that need to be focused on. And they don't live in a vacuum.
Give me for instance, what kind of issue?
For instance, I would say traffic.
Okay.
And traffic is tied to the hospital, the middle school, the high school, the 10 schools that are here. In fact, here's the traffic study from the middle school that you and I talked about the first time out. And if you look at the last page, one of the recommendations, a strong one, is to have a light at Balch and McKay put in, or at least a stop sign for all directions before the middle school was completed. And that never has happened. Yeah. But I brought that along for you for perusal.
I saw it the first time around and I remember,
Yeah.
And like you say, this is one of the problems that I think we're facing in Beverly, is that there's a lot of good ideas and suggestions that are made, and they're not getting implemented.
Yes.
And it's a matter of priorities, and I guess as a city councilor, I would expect you would have to be contributing to the voice that says, hey, this is a priority, and how do we make this happen?
Exactly. And I think that, and from a Ward 3, primarily a Ward 3 point of view. Yeah. So I've been here, I've been campaigning for 6 months and holding signs at the corner of Cabot and Balch. I see the morning traffic. I see the struggles of the children trying to cross and their parents to get to school. The buses leave the middle school and go down New Balch and actually cut over on Jenna Street to avoid the McKay-Balch intersection. Yeah. So these traffic needs our attention, and there need to be efficient, practical solutions to help us figure it out, because it's the quality of life, it's not a school issue, it's a business issue, it's a resident issue. I mean, I remember watching a show and you were talking about trying to get down Cabot Street to a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at your campaign sheet here, and it says here you want to strongly advocate to end charging tuition fees for kindergarten students.
Yes.
So my question is, how are you going to do that? Are you going to do that by adding more taxes? Or what's your plan for that?
The city council, the city just certified $9 million in free cash last night, more than $9 million. And I believe that the kindergarten fee is a place that costs us money in the end, because I believe that the more schooling that you get to these kids at the beginning of their education, the better off we will be as a community. We will, number one, it's better for the kids, for their social, emotional learning, as well as to get used to being in that school environment. I think it's also important in terms of learning. So down the road, I think there are studies out there that show the earlier you catch certain learning challenges, the easier it is to remediate them. So we are an outlier in this city in terms of not providing free full day kindergarten.
So you're saying the free cash should be used for that?
That's one place.
Okay.
Or I think also just digging into these budgets and figuring out areas where I don't think that every program should be in stone. I think that, there are areas that constantly ought to be evaluated in the city budget to make sure they work for us. But I think it's long overdue that we not have a kindergarten fee.
Well, the last time you were here, you were talking about a future meeting with Brian Ailes to understand.
I did not get that in. I sat down with the planner, but I did not get to Brian Ailes.
Okay. If you got to Brian Ailes, what would you want to find out?
I'd like to understand exactly more about the tax base in terms of the impacts on Ward 3 families and businesses specifically. I hear every day that I'm out going door to door from people in this ward who are barely hanging on in terms of being able to continue to live in this city, that their taxes are going up at such a high clip that they're having a hard time making ends meet.
Well, we've had 2 mayors in a row that have pushed the tax increase to the max allowed by Prop 2.5 and new growth. So that this is an attitude that has pervaded the city for, I would guess, 10, 15 years now, at least. So how are you going to change that?
And I think part of it is talking about how much cash there really is and what we need versus what we have and what we want. I think that there is quite a bit of cash in reserve, and I'm not against reserves, but putting aside as much as we do, and 10% a year, which is at the high end of what is recommended for a rainy day fund. I mean, George, do you need a rainy day fund? I mean, at what point is it that we're taxing and putting it in the bank versus, keeping it in our residents' and our businesses' pockets for reinvestment?
While we're talking about taxes, one of my pet peeves is tax classification. And you look at tax classification, the city of Beverly charges the business community 175% of the tax rate. How do you feel about that? Because when you look at the business community, and you own a business,
I own a business, and I deal with this in Salem.
Right. So businesses don't get as many services as the residential community, yet they pay a lot more in taxes. How do you feel about that? And would you continue at the 175% rate, or would you want to lower it?
I think we'd have to do a little more digging into that personally, but businesses do generally pay a higher rate, and that is across the board. Where that rate is could certainly be open to discussion. I mean, Elliot, what do you think it should be?
Well, I was a past president of the Cape Ann Chamber of Commerce. I owned a business there and property there, and the Chamber of Commerce oftentimes would go to the city council and negotiate. And right now, the chamber has been able to negotiate, I think it's 1.01%.
The Cape Ann.
Cape Ann Chamber.
Right.
So, and that's in Gloucester. Does it have to be that low? No. But 125 would be okay, because basically, if you take a small store downtown and you increase their taxes, who's really paying for it? The people that buy from them.
Yeah.
So I'd like to, and they're consumers but they're also residents of the city of Beverly.
And the big picture for me is I run because I believe we need to have conversations like this out in the open, that new ideas can come to the forefront, and then beyond that, civics, the civic citizens here, the residents, the business people, will feel heard and responded to. We're not all going to agree, and that's okay. But the ability to have these conversations, for me, is vital, because without them, I feel that people become despondent. 14% of the electorate voted in this preliminary.
Yeah,
and that's not okay for me. And I have talked to many a voter who say, I just don't vote anymore because I've never found a person to really vote for. I don't feel heard. And this is a big reason why I have taken this time out, because I didn't particularly feel heard. And we're not going to change Washington, but I want the residents of Ward 3 to feel heard and responded to and respected, because ideas like yours and how much we tax each other are important.
Well, one of the issues that brings that to the point is we built a new middle school.
Yeah.
Tore down Memorial, and in the process emptied out Briscoe. And so they rented it this summer for making a movie. That's good. But they're still talking about what are we going to do with Briscoe. But at the same time, we're about to spend $27 million to build a brand new building for the police department. And I would like to know, for instance, what could we do with Briscoe for $27 million? I don't know if that question has ever been asked or anybody's ever considered it. And yet it just rolls on, and we're going to build this police station, which we need one, there's no doubt about that. But how do we get these kind of discussions going, and how do we get them from beyond two of us talking in a back alley someplace? You know what they did this time? And get it up to the point of it shows up at City Hall and somebody there says, yeah, why aren't we doing that?
Well, that's why I asked a bunch of times for the traffic study for you.
Yeah.
A part of it is just respectful determination and raising the expectation that we want to understand what's going on. And I don't know who's on this final committee for Briscoe. I don't know enough about, for my heart, I've read what I could, but I don't know enough about the different projects that could go in there. And I agree with you. We need, as an electorate, more information. $28 million for a police station. We all know we need a police station. There is no doubt here. Yeah. And I think this was a phenomenal opportunity for the city to say, we built this because, and here is where the money went. It went here, and this cost that. And it went there, and this cost that. And here were the options. And this is how it's shaken out.
Yeah.
To bring consensus to the table. But just to say, this is what we're doing, and this is what is in it. I mean, and there are some great things in it. I mean, I think the geothermal piece is really important. But I've never bought a police station before, you know, so I would like to feel more comfortable as well as you.
I've made suggestions to a number of councilors about Briscoe being the new city hall. There's parking, there's a nice auditorium, and I've got a plan for paying for it so it doesn't cost the city any money. But the mayor doesn't like me, so that's not going to happen. And when you're talking about having an open forum, see that's what's needed.
And I've heard from so many people, you know, and Briscoe's in Ward 3, that they would like to see all the city offices, move to Briscoe.
Right, makes sense.
I have heard a number of people say that the cost of doing that is just prohibitive. And many people who I respect, because for me, I think it's a great fit. But I've heard just the cost is just ridiculous.
The thing that gets me about that comment is that we're going to sell that to somebody.
Yeah.
And they're going to make some sort of profitable operation out of it.
Yeah.
And they're going to incur those same costs. And they're going to still make a profit out of it.
And so are we too far down the line, George?
I don't know.
I don't know, because there's a process. You know, there was a Briscoe committee, and there was, and there are 4, they came up with a set of questions, and there are 4 RFPs submitted. Of the 4, I just believe that senior housing is really important, because I talk to people my age and older who want to downsize, and they feel like they have nowhere to go. Mm-hmm. And they feel their kids don't have anywhere to buy in. So I think, but I agree that I feel like it's fuzzy. If somebody were to tell me it would cost $250 million to do just what we're talking about, then I would argue that the population would say either, oh, or that's not practical, or this is us. Briscoe is a defining piece of Beverly, and this is what we want to invest in. But I don't know. I've never seen the costs.
Yeah, you're talking about a transparency problem that the city has. That things happen, and all of a sudden, how did that happen? I don't know. It just did. And the other thing you bring up, the senior housing or the lack of affordable housing, I went through this with the candidate for Ward 5 the other night when we had a different show. In our neighborhood, I just take the assessed value of the property up from my property, and the property is worth $1 million an acre. Yeah. And it's got a zoning requirement of R10, which means you're going to get 4 houses on an acre. Right. And at $275 a square foot, which is the going construction rate around here, you put a 1,000 square foot house up, which is not terribly big.
It's small.
It's small, and you got $500,000 and change in a piece of property. And like you were saying earlier, the average person working around here doesn't spring for that kind of money very quickly. So we've got a serious concern of how do we get housing that people can afford. It automatically implies that you're going to have to build a multi-story building because of the cost of the land and the fact that we're bringing in the expatriates from Boston who can't afford to live there. we're driving up our land costs, and it makes it more difficult the more we do this. So I'm looking for somebody who's got a plan that says, we've got to do something about low-income housing, and that immediately gets people into thinking about Igor Peru or some of these other places that got torn down. So there's a cultural shift that has to be made of how do we accept the fact that we can build low-income housing but not have it turn into one of these disasters like Chicago tore down 17 of their projects for lots of reasons.
This is really important. This is arguably the linchpin of what's so important with what's happening now in Ward 3 and Beverly. Mm-hmm. My grandfather came here from Russia and landed right here in Ward 3 and found opportunity and was able to make a life and a family. And there are so many people like him that are still today doing that. Mm. And I, for one, really value that diversity economically in Beverly and in the ward. Now, if there were a silver bullet for this, someone would have found it.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think there are many, we have to do two things. First, we have to agree as a community that this is important to us. So Mike Wheeler
what I
at
hear
the
you
bank,
saying, and a lot of other candidates have been saying, they're going around knocking on doors, and they're hearing the story that we need housing that people can afford.
yes.
So it's not a unique Ward 3 problem.
It isn't a unique Ward 3 problem, but there is more affordable housing and housing that people can afford in Ward 3, and we want to make sure that it does not become gentrified.
Okay. That
those neighborhoods remain working class and more affordable. I think that's important for the cultural fabric of this city. So I talk to residents who own triple deckers or apartment buildings. They may be owner occupied or not. And they tell me all the time how they charge below market because this is what is important to them. I think that perhaps some CPA money could be, through a nonprofit, funneled back to certain homeowners to be able to do upgrades, low interest, no interest loans to do some upgrades. I think that we have to accept that our population is growing and look at this from the point of view of traffic, housing, the schools, public safety, and try to work at this problem together. I mean, this is a city that has an incredibly successful downtown now and has been working at it. This is a city that has a massive heart. And I think if you can get the business community buy-in, people who live here, people who own properties, I think we can work at it. We have Harbor Light, but I think it's not a single issue. And I think it's going to be we had that plan that was put together, but we need to focus on housing that is affordable. That would be my primary goal.
The housing, the new apartments and stuff that's on Rantoul Street don't seem to be that affordable. And yet people who live there, of course, they commute to Boston because we have so many train stations and it's easy to get into Boston. Eventually they're going to move out of their apartment, get into a house. But if they're paying $1,500 a month for rent and can afford that, they can afford a more expensive house. So it's a quandary right now. I mean, we're building expensive places for people to live, and we're not allowing for enough affordable housing.
The HUD study said we needed all types of housing.
Yeah.
And we need to focus on all types of housing.
Yeah.
That's the reality. And I think that's part of people's ire with Rantoul Street is that many feel in Ward 3, and probably throughout the city, it's not just Ward 3, that they can't access it. If there were housing there and it's more than $1,500 a month, that people felt that they could downsize, then I think there'd be more buy-in for that. But there is not.
Yeah. And then the next wave of buildings are going to go on the other side of the railroad tracks.
Yeah. The problem right now on Rantoul Street is it's becoming also a wind tunnel, which makes me a little cranky, but that's all right. I get cranky over a lot of stuff, don't I, George?
And I think green space is really important because as we get warmer and wetter with global warming, when you have all these hardscapes, the runoff becomes more toxic. I think it's a it's a thoughtful, inclusive process.
You have 2 minutes to tell people why they should vote for you.
It's been a fun half hour again.
Has it been a fun half hour?
Yeah, I mean, time goes by.
It does.
That's because we're so much fun anyhow, George.
Well, thank you for inviting me back again. It's been a pleasure. We're 1 week to go before the election. I'm Stacy Ames, as I said, and I'm running for Ward 3 Council because I believe that Ward 3 is the education center, the economic hub, and full of just wonderful neighborhoods. It's the heart of Beverly. And I want to be a counselor who works very hard for the people who work and live here. I believe in open process. I believe in that every resident deserves to be listened to, heard, and responded to. I cannot thank the residents who have opened their doors to me enough. I can't thank the friends and neighbors who have helped out on this campaign for all their time and hard work and earnest comments about where they believe the city should go. And I hope that we will all come out and vote next Tuesday. We can't really do much about the evening news, but if we go out and your vote is your voice. So if you vote next week, then I think we can really make an impact on how this city moves into the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stacy, for coming on the show. We appreciate it. This was a good, lively discussion.
Thanks.
And as Stacy said, it's very important. Vote next Tuesday because that is your voice. I don't want to hear complaints from people if they don't vote. Good night, and watch our next show with more candidates coming. Thank you.